The morning sun crept gently over the hills, painting the Taylor family's farmhouse in golden light. The fields were alive with the sounds of spring, birds chirping, bees humming, the occasional rustle of a breeze through the grass. It was the kind of peaceful morning that made the worries of the world feel far away. Inside the house, the Taylors were beginning their day with warm coffee, breakfast chatter, and the soft laughter of baby Lily. Max, their 5-year-old German shepherd, had already begun his daily routine. He was a large, strong dog with a noble stance and intelligent eyes. To the Taylors, Max wasn't just a pet, he was family. Loyal to a fault and incredibly aware of the people around him, Max was the silent shadow at Sarah's heels as she worked in the garden, the guardian by the porch when baby Lily napped, outside in her playpen, and the ever-watchful companion to her husband Jake during morning chores. Every morning, Max would roam the property making his rounds. He'd sniff along the fence line, check the gate at the far end of the pasture, and often bark a greeting to the neighbor's collie through the trees. It was his quiet way of protecting the place he loved and the people he cherished. He never strayed far, and he always returned before breakfast, waiting patiently by the back door for his treat, a small strip of bacon, always saved just for him. But this morning, Max didn't come back. At first, Sarah thought nothing of it. "He's probably sniffing out a squirrel or following a rabbit," she said aloud, brushing crumbs off the table as Lily babbled in her high chair. Max had always had a curious streak. Still, something in her chest tightened. She tried to shake it off. By 9 a.m., Max was still missing. Jake stepped outside, whistling for him as he walked down toward the barn. "Max, come on, boy," he called. Only silence answered. No panting, no bounding paws, no jingle of the metal tag on Max's collar. It was strange. Max never ignored a call, especially not Jake's. Sarah joined in, calling for him as she circled the front field. Still nothing. She called their neighbor, Mr. Hill, in case Max had wandered over to play with the other dogs. "Haven't seen him this morning," the old man said kindly. "I'll keep an eye out." Worry began to creep in. They searched the back pasture, the flower beds, the edge of the woods. Jake even walked along the gravel road near the property. "He's not the type to run off," he said under his breath, glancing over his shoulder. Something's not right. Inside the house, Lily suddenly stopped playing. Her toy clattered to the floor as she turned toward the window, her eyes fixed on something outside. She reached one hand upward, palm open, and let out a soft, puzzled sound. Then another. She toddled to the door, pressing both hands against it. "Max?" she said. Sarah froze. It was the first time Lily had ever said his name. She hurried to the door, opening it wide. Lily stepped out, barefoot on the porch, and pointed toward the back of the property. Sarah listened. At first, there was nothing, just the breeze, the rustle of leaves. Then, faint and broken, she heard it too. A sound, far off and echoing. A low, urgent whimper. "Jake!" she shouted, heart racing. "Did you hear that?" He appeared from the side of the house, eyes wide. "Where's it coming from?" They both stopped, listening. The sound came again, closer now, a soft, panicked cry. It was Max, and he was in trouble. The moment Sarah and Jake heard the faint whimper again, their calm morning turned into something urgent. There was no mistaking that sound. It was Max. But it didn't come from the woods or the fields or even the road. It was coming from somewhere closer, yet hidden. The kind of place you'd never think to look unless you knew something was wrong. Jake grabbed a flashlight and began moving toward the back of the property. Sarah just steps behind him, holding Lily close against her chest. The crying grew louder with each step. It was strained and broken, a sound no one ever wanted to hear from their loyal dog. They passed the old tool shed, rounded the side of the barn, and came to a sudden stop. There it was, the old well, covered in weeds and vines. It had been unused for years. The stone rim was chipped, and the wooden cover that once sealed it had long since rotted away, replaced only by a piece of warped plywood. It was supposed to be blocked off with fencing, but the last storm had knocked part of it down. They hadn't gotten around to fixing it. Now it was wide open. Jake rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside the edge. "Max!" he called, voice tight with panic. He shone the flashlight down the shaft. There, about 10 feet below, was Max. He was soaked and muddy, balanced on a narrow stone ledge just above the water. His eyes flickered upward the moment he saw Jake, and he let out a soft, broken whimper. His body trembled with fear and exhaustion. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. "He must have fallen in hours ago." Jake scanned the area quickly. That ledge is the only thing keeping him from falling in further. If he slips... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. They could both see the water swirling beneath him. Max looked up at them again, whining softly, as if apologizing for the trouble. Jake stood up fast. "We need rope and a harness, anything. I'll call the fire department, but I don't know how long they'll take to get out here." Sarah clutched Lily tighter as she backed away from the well. Her heart ached seeing Max like that. This dog had stood guard by their daughters. Crib slept at the door every night and once chased off a wild raccoon trying to dig through the trash near the porch. He was brave, loyal, gentle. And now he was trapped. As Jake ran to the garage to grab supplies, Sarah knelt down beside the well and gently called to Max. "It's okay, boy. We found you. Just hang on." Her voice cracked, but she tried to sound calm. Max didn't bark or struggle. He just kept looking up at her with tired, trusting eyes. Inside the house, Lily had grown more agitated. Sarah had placed her in the playpen to keep her safe while they worked, but the little girl was now standing and reaching out her arms toward the back door. She wasn't crying, but she was babbling in a frantic, emotional tone, repeating sounds over and over that were too garbled to make out clearly. Then came the word again. "Max," she said. It wasn't a coincidence. She knew. Somehow she knew. Sarah's breath caught as she looked back toward the door, stunned by her daughter's connection to the dog. Lily had only just started saying her first words, but in that moment, it was as if something inside her understood Max's pain, his fear, his need for help. Jake returned minutes later with a bundle of rope, an old climbing harness, and a steel hook he'd kept from his treehouse building days. "Help's on the way," he said, breathless. "But we can't wait." The sun was higher now, but the well's shadows seemed darker. Max shifted slightly, letting out a sharp yelp as a piece of the ledge cracked and fell into the water below. They didn't have much time, and little did they know, it would be baby Lily's next move that would change everything. The crumbling edge of the old stone well sent a sharp splash echoing from below as a chunk of rock fell into the dark water. Max jerked back in alarm, his paws skidding slightly on the narrow ledge. He let out a frantic bark, one that chilled Sarah to the bone. "Hold on, boy," Jake shouted, quickly tying a loop in the climbing rope. His fingers were shaking, not from fear for himself, but from the overwhelming dread that they might be too late. The ledge was visibly deteriorating, and Max had nowhere else to go. Sarah ran back toward the house, heart pounding, scooping up Lily from her playpen as she reached the back door. The baby had tears in her eyes, still pointing toward the field, repeating the same soft syllable. "Max, Max, Max." Sarah tried to soothe her, but Lily squirmed in her arms, desperately reaching toward the sound of Max's cries. It was as if she felt every moment of his fear. Her small face was scrunched in concentration, lips trembling with the effort of trying to communicate something more. Meanwhile, Jake secured the rope to the trunk of an old oak tree near the well, then tested the weight. He wasn't sure if he could get down there safely, but waiting for emergency services felt impossible. Every time Max moved, dust and tiny stones crumbled beneath him. "I'm going in," Jake muttered. Sarah had returned, watching nervously, from a few feet away with Lily in her arms. She couldn't speak, couldn't bring herself to stop him. The look in his eyes said it all. He wasn't going to let that dog die. Just then, Lily did something neither of them expected. She reached out her tiny hand toward the well, her fingers stretching open. Her voice, normally playful and high-pitched, dropped into a quiet hum. It was a soft, broken melody, a tune she'd heard Sarah sing at bedtime, only now it came out slow, shaky, and raw. It wasn't a song for sleep. It was a song of comfort. Max stopped barking, his ears twitched, and his eyes turned upward again, this time not with panic, but with strange calm. The baby's humming seemed to reach him in a way no one else's voice could. He crouched down, low, tail tucked, but his shaking lessened. Jake paused mid-descent, stunned by what he was seeing. "Is she calming him down?" he asked. Sarah stared at her daughter in disbelief. Lily continued the quiet hum, placing her hand gently on Sarah's chest, eyes still fixed on the well. Max didn't move an inch now. He stayed perfectly still, head lifted toward the sound as though it gave him something to hold on to. For a moment the chaos paused. The barking, the whimpering, even the rush of decisions, all faded into the quiet space between the baby's song and the dog's breathing. Jake reached the ledge. It was tighter than he'd thought, barely enough space for his feet. Max didn't even flinch as Jake slipped the harness over him, whispering reassurances. He secured the rope around the dog's chest, double-checking every knot. Then he gave the signal. With Sarah holding Lily tightly, she braced herself as Jake pulled himself back up with the rope, guiding Max alongside him. The rope strained, creaked, and shifted, but slowly, inch by inch, Max rose out of the darkness. Cheers and gasps erupted from the neighbors who had arrived just in time to witness the end of the rescue. Someone called out, "He's out!" Jake collapsed to the grass, gasping, his hands raw. Max, covered in mud and trembling, didn't run to Jake. He turned toward Lily. Still in her mother's arms, she reached for him, and Max pressed his snout gently to her tiny hand, letting out the softest whine. It was a thank you. The scene around the old well was one of relief, but also stunned silence. Max, caked in mud and soaked to the skin, stood weakly in the tall grass. His legs trembled from exhaustion, yet his eyes never left baby Lily. Sarah knelt down beside him, one arm holding Lily close. Max limped toward her, his steps cautious and slow. Without hesitation, he rested his head gently against Lily's tiny feet. The little girl, now quiet again, reached down and ran her fingers through the wet fur on his forehead. The two of them didn't make a sound, but in that moment, no words were needed. Jake sat a few feet away, chest heaving as he caught his breath. His arms were scraped, and his jeans torn at the knees from climbing out of the well, but he was smiling through it all. "I can't believe it," he murmured. She knew, before we did. The neighbors who had gathered around were equally amazed. A few clapped softly. One woman wiped tears from her cheeks, whispering, "That baby." She felt something none of us did. It wasn't just that Lily had sensed something was wrong. It was how she responded, how she reached for the door before the cries were even clear, how she had led her grandmother to the source, how she had stilled Max with her voice. It was something deeper than instinct. It was a connection. Later, as the small crowd began to leave and the sun reached its peak in the sky, Sarah brought Max into the house to clean his wounds. Lily was in her high chair now, but her eyes followed Max wherever he moved, as though she were still watching over him. Every time he winced or let out a soft grunt of pain, her brow furrowed, and she'd reach a tiny hand in his direction. Sarah noticed. "She's not just watching him," she said to Jake, who was rinsing his hands in the kitchen sink. "She's reacting, like she can feel what he feels." Jake glanced at Lily, then at Max, then back at his wife. "You think it's just a phase? A toddler's sensitivity?" Sarah shook her head slowly. "I don't think this is a phase. I think it's something else." Max rested now on a blanket beside the fireplace, his breathing steady but slow. He didn't lift his head when people walked by. But the moment Lily made a noise, his ears perked and his eyes followed. Hours passed. That night, after a warm bath and a soft lullaby, Lily was tucked into her crib. Max lay right beside it, his body curled protectively beneath the window. He wouldn't move, not for food, not even for water. Every now and then, he'd glance up at the crib, as if checking to make sure his little hero was still safe. And every time he did, Lily would stir slightly in her sleep and reach one hand through the crib slats, resting her fingers in the air. Just above him, Sarah and Jake stood in the doorway, watching the unlikely pair. "She's never reached out like that before," Jake said. "She's never needed to," Sarah replied softly. "But tonight she knows he needs her." A silence settled between them, not awkward or empty, but full of unspoken understanding. They had always loved Max as a member of the family, but tonight something had changed. A bond had been forged between their baby girl and their brave dog that went beyond words or training or time. It was the kind of bond that didn't need to be explained. It just needed to be felt. Morning broke over the farmhouse, golden light slipping through the curtains as if trying to warm the heart still aching from the night before. In the living room, Max stirred slightly but didn't rise. His muscles ached and his paws were raw, but his ears stayed alert. His gaze remained fixed on the crib down the hall. Lily woke before anyone else. She didn't cry. She didn't make her usual morning noises. Instead, she sat up slowly, her tiny hands gripping the wooden rails of the crib. Her eyes, still drowsy, turned toward the hallway. A moment later, she reached out toward the door. "Max," she whispered. Sarah, who had barely slept, heard the soft call through the baby monitor. She rose instantly, wrapping herself in her robe and hurrying to the nursery. When she arrived, she found Lily already standing, her hand still outstretched. At that same moment, Max struggled to his feet. His legs wobbled, but he pushed forward until he was at the door of the nursery. Sarah opened it wider, and Max stepped in, limping beside the crib. What happened next left Sarah breathless. Lily leaned forward and placed both hands on Max's head, resting her forehead gently against his. For a long moment, they didn't move. There were no sounds, just soft breathing, a quiet room, and the sunrise pouring through the window. Sarah could feel something settle in the air, a peace, a recognition, a silent promise between two souls who had found each other through fear and love. By mid-morning, word had spread beyond their immediate neighbors. Photos of Max's rescue, especially the one showing Lily reaching for him as he lay beside the well, had made their way onto a local community page online. Comments flooded in. People from nearby towns offered supplies. Others sent messages of love, and a few offered help repairing the dangerous well. And then something remarkable happened. One by one, people began arriving. Not just to offer help, but to meet the baby who had led the way, who had heard what no one else could, who had stayed calm when even the adults had panicked. They brought toys for Lily, treats for Max, and tools to help secure the well properly this time. Jake stood by the old oak tree, overseeing the repairs. "We'll seal it right this time," he told the group of volunteers. "No more boards. We're capping it with concrete." Sarah watched from the porch as a woman approached holding a box of fresh-baked cookies and a small hand-knit blanket. "For Lily," the woman said, her voice soft. "My dog fell in a well when I was a little girl. We didn't find him in time. I saw the photo of your daughter and I just wanted to thank her." "She's only just started to speak," Sarah said with a gentle smile. But somehow she said everything Max needed to hear. Nearby, Lily sat on a blanket in the grass watching the workers, her fingers wrapped tightly around Max's ear. He didn't seem to mind. In fact, he seemed to draw strength from her touch. Each time someone approached, Max raised his head, but never left Lily's side. It became clear to everyone who visited that day. This bond wasn't an accident. It wasn't just a cute story for the internet. It was something deeper. Later that afternoon, a reporter arrived from the local news station. She interviewed Jake and Sarah, took a few photos, and then crouched down to Lily's level. "Do you know you're famous?" she asked playfully. Lily blinked at her, then looked at Max. She reached over, placed her small hand on his nose, and said, "Safe." The reporter choked back tears. Max gently nudged Lily's hand and laid his head in her lap. And just like that, a town that had come to help realized it wasn't just a dog that had been rescued. It was hope. Over the next few days, the farmhouse, once a quiet place tucked away at the edge of town, became a symbol of something far greater than anyone expected. What started as a rescue story had turned into something deeper, a quiet reminder of compassion, connection, and the surprising strength of a child barely able to speak. Sarah and Jake were overwhelmed, but in the best possible way. The community didn't just show up with tools and kind words. They stayed. Neighbors who had never spoken more than a wave from their porches now brought meals, helped patch the fence, and even offered to repaint the aging barn. At the center of it all, always, were Lily and Max. They were inseparable. Max followed Lily with soft, slow steps, his injuries healing day by day. He still limped slightly, but his spirit had returned. His ears perked at every sound she made, and his tail thumped gently whenever she laughed. And Lily, she was changing too. Before the accident, she had spoken only a handful of simple words. But now, she was blooming. Each day she tried new sounds, pointed at things with intent, and most of all, she spoke to Max constantly. Short, choppy phrases filled with meaning only he seemed to fully understand. Max, stay. Max, come. Safe, Max. Safe. Sarah watched in quiet awe. She had read books about early childhood development, but nothing had prepared her for this. This emotional awakening brought on not by therapy or toys, but by love and fear, shared between a baby and her best friend. On the fourth day after the rescue, the town gathered again, this time for a small celebration organized at the local park. The mayor had caught wind of the story after the local news piece aired, and he wanted to do something special. So they did. Children ran through the grass with balloons, dogs barked happily on leashes, and tables were set with cupcakes and lemonade. In the center of the field, a banner read, "To Lily and Max, our little heroes." When Sarah carried Lily onto the field, a cheer rose from the crowd. Lily didn't understand the attention. She clutched Max's leash in her tiny fist and looked around with wide eyes, her brow furrowed the way it always was when something new happened. But Max walked beside her proudly, calm and confident in a way only a dog who had felt real fear, and come back from it, could. The mayor approached with a framed certificate and a wide grin. "We don't usually give awards to toddlers," he said with a chuckle, "but I think we'll make an exception." Sarah smiled, holding Lily on her hip. "She might not remember this moment when she's older," she said, "but I think Max will remind her in his own way." Jake took the leash gently and let Max sit beside them while the mayor continued. This story reminded all of us that bravery doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers in the voice of a child, and sometimes it's found in the loyalty of a friend who never gave up. There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. After the speech, people gathered to pet Max and wave to Lily. Some brought gifts, plush dogs that looked like Max, picture books, and even a small collar with Max's name etched into a silver tag that read, "Forever Family." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in soft golds and purples, Sarah sat on a bench with Lily on her lap. Max curled at their feet, resting his head against Lily's leg. She reached down, stroking his fur in slow, sleepy movements. Then she said it again, softly, like a secret meant only for him. Home. Sarah's heart swelled, because she knew her daughter wasn't just saying a word. She was telling him what he had been waiting to hear. The days passed gently, as if the world had slowed down just to let Lily and Max enjoy each other's company. The farmhouse was quiet again, but now it felt different, warmer, brighter, filled with the kind of peace that only comes after surviving. Something frightening and coming out stronger on the other side. Max was healing well. The wounds on his paws had scabbed over, and his limp was less noticeable with each passing day. But while his body grew stronger, Sarah noticed something else happening, something no vet appointment could explain. Max had always been a loyal companion. But now, it was as if he had been transformed into something more. He didn't just follow Lily anymore. He anticipated her every move. When she cried out in her crib at night, Max was there before the monitor even sounded. If she wandered near a toy that was too small, Max gently nudged it away. And when she tried climbing onto the couch, something she hadn't dared do before, Max stood beside her, steady and unmoving, letting her use his side as support. It was as if he had become her guardian. But then came the night everything changed. Sarah was in the kitchen preparing bottles when she heard a strange sound from the living room. Not a cry, not a bark, something in between. A soft, anxious whine. She rushed in and found Max pacing in front of the window, his ears back, tail low, eyes darting toward the hallway. "What is it, boy?" she asked, her heart picking up speed. Max didn't answer, of course, but he kept whining, glancing toward the hallway and then back at her. Sarah turned and froze. Lily's bedroom door was open. She ran. Inside, the crib was empty, her breath caught in her throat, until she saw a soft trail of blocks and stuffed toys leading to the back door. Somehow Lily had climbed out of her crib, opened the door, and wandered outside. Jake, hearing the panic, sprinted after Sarah. Max bolted ahead of both of them, sniffing frantically and letting out sharp, alert barks. They found her at the edge of the yard, standing dangerously close to the ditch near the old field. Her little feet were wobbly, and her gaze was fixed on something none of them could see. But Max saw it. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward her, sliding in the dirt just in time to block her from taking one more step. She tumbled softly onto him, startled but unharmed. Jake scooped her up as Sarah dropped to her knees, shaking. Lily looked up at Max, wide-eyed and breathing fast. But then, incredibly, she smiled. "Max," she whispered, and then for the first time she said something she had never said before. "Thank you." Sarah gasped. She's never said that. Jake looked down at Max, who sat calmly, chest rising and falling. He was still alert, still focused, but his tail gave one slow wag. That night, they didn't sleep much, not from fear, but from awe. Sarah sat beside Lily's crib long after she'd drifted off, Max lying next to her like a silent sentinel. Jake sat with them, his arm draped around Sarah's shoulder. "She's learning from him," Sarah said softly. Jake nodded. "And he's watching her like she's the most important thing in the world." "Maybe she is," Sarah whispered. Outside, the wind stirred the trees gently, like a lullaby written in the language of leaves and night. Inside, Lily stirred in her sleep and reached through the bars of her crib again. Max was there. Of course, he was, and as her hand rested lightly on his fur, both of them breathed in perfect time. The days that followed felt almost magical, like the world had shifted to make room for something extraordinary. Max and Lily weren't just a baby and a dog anymore. They were a team, a pair connected by something deeper than friendship or loyalty. Sarah and Jake watched as their daughter's language blossomed, slowly but beautifully. After the rescue, Lily's words grew clearer, her eyes brighter, and her spirit stronger. And Max was always close by, like a quiet shadow that never left her side. One afternoon, the family gathered in the garden, the soft hum of summer bees filling the air. Sarah sat on the bench with Lily in her lap, while Jake trimmed the hedges nearby. Max lay stretched out on the grass, head resting on his paws, but alert to every movement. Lily looked up suddenly, eyes focused on Max's face. She reached out and touched his ear gently. "Max," she said clearly. "Friend." Jake smiled from across the yard. "That's the first real sentence," he said softly to Sarah. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "It took a moment like this," she whispered. A moment of calm and love. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of pink and orange, Sarah sat by the fireplace with Jake and Lily. Max curled up at their feet, a steady warmth against the cool floor. Lily reached up and stroked Max's head, her small fingers gentle and sure. "Safe," she said. Max gave a soft, happy whine and nuzzled her hand. It was a simple exchange, but it spoke volumes. Over the following weeks, the story of Max and Lily spread beyond their little town. It was shared in newsletters, on social media, and even picked up by a local TV station. But what touched people most wasn't just the rescue. It was the unspoken language between a baby and a dog. It was proof that sometimes, when words fail, hearts can still speak. One chilly morning, a package arrived at the farmhouse. Inside was a framed photograph sent by a woman from another state, a picture of her own dog, once trapped and saved by a child's bravery. On the back, a note read, "Sometimes the smallest voices save the biggest hearts. Keep believing in miracles." Sarah placed the photo on the mantel beside a picture of Max and Lily, smiling softly. She realized their story was now part of something bigger, a shared hope, a reminder of the power of love and courage in the most unexpected forms. Years later, when Lily could run and talk and dream, she would still call Max her friend and guardian. Max, now older but still strong, in spirit, never left her side. And whenever anyone asked about their bond, Sarah would simply say, "Some connections don't need explanation. They just are." That German shepherd who once cried for help from a well had found more than rescue. He had found a family, a purpose, and a little girl whose love healed more than just his body. And Lily, the baby who reached out in the darkest moment, had shown everyone that sometimes the purest courage comes from the smallest hearts. Together, they taught a town, and the world, that love is the greatest rescue of all.